FNAPE, who is also going to be our chairman for today. So other members of the EXCO, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Bassi, Dr. Chimeze, Professor Akpabio, Derek Akpabio. You're all welcome to today's technical session. I also want to welcome all the students, the professionals on board for this special edition of the technical presentation. Without wasting much ado or wasting time, I would invite Dr. Oke Agbasi, our treasurer, to take on the safety moments. Thereafter, we'll have the announcement proper, so I don't waste much time. Thank you so much, and God bless you once again for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our coordinator. I want to use the opportunity to welcome everyone to the Calabar technical, our first Calabar technical section. But before we begin, I want us to take a moment to review some important safety guidelines for virtual environment so as to ensure a smooth and productive experience for all. The first thing we have to take note is we have to ensure that we mute our mics. So please keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking to minimize background noise and distraction. Then it's always advisable to use a headphone for optimal audio quality, and this will also aid to avoid echo. So we strongly recommend using our headphones, preferably with the inbuilt microphone. Also, we strongly advise to stay around where we have a stable network. This would help prevent distortion and allow for full participation. Then also let's try and avoid multitasking if we stay engaged by giving our full attention to the section. It will help our better understanding on and help us engage thoroughly in today's discussion, which is quite an interesting one. Then just in case of emergency, if you experience a health emergency during this section, please have your local emergency contact number accessible to you. Then for cyber security and privacy, be alert to any security risks. Do not click on familiar links or share personal information, and stay away from potential pushing attempts. Then let's engage respectfully, use the chat, reaction, and virtual hand raising features to participate. Please, we should try and also maintain a respectful and professional tone. Listen attentively and allow others to speak without interruption. Thank you for your attention. Let's make this a productive, respectful, and secure section for everyone. Thank you once again, and welcome to today's technical meeting from Calabar chapter. Thank you, my coordinator.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Chimeze Meka. I'm so excited for taking us through that. And so next is going to be a welcoming remark from our president-elect, Mrs. Olajumoke Ajayi, FNAPE. The president called me, he said he's on transit. He probably will join later. So in his absence, please, I want to welcome Mrs. Olajumoke Ajayi to please give us a welcoming remark. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ari, and happy Easter to every one of us. I welcome us all to the technical meeting of today of our Uyo chapter. And I can see that we have a topical discussion to have today. I want us all to please listen attentively, because I believe we'll all learn from the talk of today. And thank you very much, chapter chair, for putting this together at this time. And then all thanks to our speaker and the chairman of today's event. I believe that we'll have a good time. And at the end of the whole meeting today, we'll all have, like I said, have one or two things to take away, which will guide us in our daily activities, especially in the area of geoscience. Thank you very much, and I wish us all a pleasant time at today's meeting. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you so much, man. We really appreciate your kind remarks. We really appreciate. So, time I'd like to welcome the secretary to take up the announcement before I introduce the chairman of the day. The announcements by Nape. Please, you can share your screen and let's have the announcements before I introduce the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the coordinator, for this opportunity. So we're all welcome to NAP 2025, April 2025 technical meeting. This meeting is sponsored by Alpha Reta Oil and Gas Services Worldwide Limited. So we welcome all the participants, the president, and the panelists. Okay, so after we'll have the technical business meeting continues for 2025. We'll be having a Benin chapter technical meeting on the 24th of April 2025. The Port Harcourt chapter will be having their own technical meeting on the 29th of April 2025. There's a call for 2025 technical to business monthly meeting sponsorship. So there's an open call for sponsorship. For further inquiry, please contact Mrs. Olajumoke Cecilia Ajayi.
Please,
Sorry,
can you share the screen? Can you share the screen? You have the announcement. Can you please share the screen? If you can, then Tunde will have to help us out, please.
Yes, that's what I want.
Mr. Tunde, please, can you share the screen so that it will be faster?
You mean the announcement slides?
The
Yes,
announcement
please.
slides, please. Yes.
Okay, you just go straight to the technical meeting, technical to business meeting.
You can go on, please.
Yes. Okay, so the Yo Calabar chapter, yes.
That's the slide for you, Calabar.
Okay, that's the different one I'm having here.
Please, can you go on?
Okay, so
yes.
Okay, so the Yo Calabar chapter technical meeting today. Please, today, please, you have to keep calling. This is a different document I have here.
Please.
You mean the slides for the presentation? I don't have the slide for the presentation.
No, not for the presentation, the announcement.
Yes, it's there.
Yeah.
These are the announcements.
Where is it?
Okay, yes. Okay, yeah. Okay, so the Port Harcourt technical meeting is coming up on the 29th of April 2025. Then you have call for technical. Oh yeah, okay. So this is we're seeking for sponsorships for technical meetings. You can contact Mrs. Olajumoke, or Mr. Lawrence Oswago, as shown on the screen. Next slide, please. Next slide, Tunde, please. I need you on hand. Okay, so NAPE is hiring, and deadline for hiring is, the deadline for application is on the 23rd of. Next slide, please.
We can't really hear you.
Please, next slide. You have to move the slide. This is different from what I have here.
Okay, Emeka, don't worry. I think I can see what he's doing.
Yes,
I'll take over from him. Don't worry, I'll take over from here.
Okay.
So we're having mentoring cycles, and then that's Fuel Your Future with NAPE. So take advantage of this program, enroll your mentees. There's a website there, https 2025 mentoring cycles. So please ensure that you register for this. It's a very important program by NAPE, and it's planned to ensure value is maximized for new industry leaders and to ensure that they're developed and their potentials are fully optimized. Next slide. There are also upcoming events like the Basin Evaluation Competition 2025. Please ensure that you register for it. The schools should register. Mentors will be provided, and the deadline for registration is 16th May 2025. Next slide. And also the NAPE elections is here. Please, if you have not paid your dues, ensure that you pay your dues, especially for the active members, because the NAPE elections 2025 is now ongoing, so it's time to nominate. But first, make sure that you update your dues for you to be eligible to vote. Thank you. Next slide. And so we have our international conference coming up, the annual international conference exhibition between 9th and 13th November 2025 at Eco Hotel and Suites Lagos. And the theme for this year is revitalizing the Nigerian petroleum exploration and production strategies for energy security and sustainable development. I believe that we're all looking up to this meeting, and it's going to be the 50th anniversary of NAPE as well as an entity. So make sure that you plan to be in Lagos in November. Next slide. Yeah, so registration is out for conference coming up, and then also there are sponsorship opportunities in different categories. So you can find out where you can fully participate, even as a volunteer, and be part of it. Next slide. Tunde, is that all we have? Okay, I think that's for the announcement. Thank you so much. And at this time, I would like to, I think we still have call for abstracts. So make sure that you look forward to presenting this time around. The call for abstract is out, especially for industry professionals, academics, and the abstract submission would end on the 31st of July, 2025. Issuance of acceptance letters, 31st August, 2025. Submission of full paper and standard abstract to be 30th September, 2025. So please ensure that you're part of the conference, send your abstract for presentation, and I'm sure that you're going to have a great time. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you so much. So that was all for the announcement from our esteemed organization, NAPE. So right now, we're going to introduce the chairman who would introduce the speaker of today's event. And it's my honor to bring on board the chairman of today's meeting. I'm sure he's someone that you know very well. He's been with us in NAPE over the years, and his name is Dr. Wilson Osung. You know, Dr. Wilson Osung is a fellow of NAPE, and currently he works for the Petroleum Training Institute as an associate assistant director. So he has a BSc in geology, MSc in sedimentology and petroleum geology. And Wilson Osung has authored several international publications in reputable journals and local scientific journals as well. He has been a member of the ESCO before. He served meritoriously as the chairman or the coordinator of the Warri chapter, and currently is a fellow and member of the advisory board. Dr. Wilson is a COMEC certified geoscientist, a fellow of the Nigerian Association of Petroleum Explorationists and Institute of Management Consultants. He's also a member of Nigerian Mining and Geosciences Society. He has served as secretary, deputy coordinator, and immediate past coordinator in NAPA and Warri chapter, as I said, and is happily married to Mrs. Gloria Osung, a passionate educationist, and are blessed with lovely children. And so, on behalf of the president of NAPE, I want to welcome the chairman of today's occasion, who will introduce the speaker for today. Dr. Wilson, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Harry. I don't know if you could hear me. Could you confirm that?
I can hear you loud and clear, Doctor.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Dr. Harry, the chapter coordinator for Oyo Calabar chapter. It's always a honor to partner with you to ensure that we move our drive, to the utmost heights. My president-elect, Mrs. Olajumake Ajayi F. Napi, my vice president, Mr. Iyi Bazwaye F. Napi, all other ESCO members on this call, and ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed my pleasure and singular honor to be chairing this session. I think mine is quite easy. It's just to ensure that I bet the speaker to come and do justice to what he has been planning to do as a professional. And today's technical meeting is going to be an expository and a period of learning about the subsurface geology, looking at the reservoir characteristics, within our own Niger Delta, and we should open our minds to learn from this astute professional who has worked for a long while now, as a cementologist. I know I was also privileged to learn under him not too long ago when we had a trainer, a core analysis workshop, and he's sound. I have no doubt in my mind that today will be a learning experience for us all to be able to put into different perspective what we've all known. Today, the topic that we'll be looking at, is actually going to stimulate our thinking. Niger Delta Reservoir Geology, the processes and the eventual products at the end of the day. And the person that will be doing justice to this is Mr. Jude Omuije. Jude is a seasoned geoscientist with over 13 years of experience in the energy industry. He holds a BSc in Geosciences from Enugu State University of Science and Technology and an MSc from the University of Nigeria in Nsukka, where he is also pursuing his PhD. Currently serving as a specialist geoscientist at Renesance Africa Energy Company, formerly SPDC. He brings deep expertise in subsurface exploration, reservoir characterization, and energy resource management. His work focuses on leveraging geoscientific innovations to drive sustainable energy solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present to you Mr. Jude Omuije, the specialist geoscientist, Renesance African Energy Company, for this presentation. Please, our appeal that we be patient with him and listen attentively so that we can gain more knowledge in this knowledge sharing series. Thank you very much, Mr. Jude. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I want to confirm, can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
I hear you.
Okay, so I'm trying to share my screen. Just give me a few minutes. So can we see my screen now?
Yes,
Yes.
we can see the screen.
I see it.
Oh, splendid. I don't know if my camera is open. Okay, so I would like to thank our NAPE President-elect, Mrs. Olajumoke, the ESCOs, and the members of the Uyo Calabar chapter of NAPE for the opportunity to talk to us in this April edition of our technical meeting for NAPE. So all protocols duly observed. Let's dive quickly into the presentation for today. Today we are looking at the Niger Delta Reservoir Geology, Processes and Products. This is the outline of the presentation, a brief introduction, data and methodology for reservoir characterization, core description and interpretation overview, the dominant deltaic process, the depositional processes, and the conclusions. The Niger Delta Reservoir, the Niger Delta is a region, a very prolific hydrocarbon region, and is a complex geologic dynamic system which have been shaped by millions of years of sedimentation, tectonic activities, and interactions between fluvial, deltaic, and marine environments. Understanding the reservoir geology is key to unlocking the full potential, especially as we navigate the challenges that we currently face of production optimization, reservoir characterization, and sustainable production of hydrocarbons. In this presentation, I'll explore the geologic framework of the Niger Delta, its reservoir species, the depositional environments, and the factors that govern reservoir quality and production, and the potential of these reservoirs. I hope that we'll gain deeper insight into how these geological processes come together and form the dynamic and highly productive reservoirs that have been the backbone of Nigeria's oil and gas industries for these many years. The Niger Delta, by definition, is a delta, and the delta is a landform that is formed at the mouth of a river, where the river deposits sediment as it enters into a larger body of water, most typically an ocean or a lake. The shape of a delta is influenced by the shape, the structure, and the deposition of the delta is influenced by the dominant natural forces at play. And these dominant forces are usually the river, which is the force bringing out the sediment and the water, the tides, and the waves, which act as modifications to the landforms as the river dumps its sediments. There's been an attempt to classify by Galloway in 1975 to classify the types of deltas based on the dominant forces at play within the delta. And those forces are the river. So we have river-dominated deltas, we have wave-dominated deltas, and tide-dominated deltas. And in that attempt, the Niger Delta was classified as a wave-dominated delta. However, the Niger Delta is not a classical wave-dominated delta, as it has significant influences of both the rivers and of both the fluvial and the tidal modifications. So if you look at the Niger Delta, which we have the satellite imagery here, you see the main river is the Niger River, and the Niger River is the river that the delta is named after. And as you come down in the central part of the delta, you see that the Niger forms out into distributaries, which is a classical characteristics of a fluvial dominated system. Then, if you come to the eastern part of the delta, you see that in the eastern part of the delta, you have funnel-shaped inlets. The large one here in Oron, and then another one here, and you have smaller ones across the eastern part of the delta. And that is a classical characteristics of a tidal dominated deltaic system. While in the western part of the delta, if I can zoom in, you will see elongate waveform barrier beds overlapping one another. And that is also an indication of a wave-dominated deltaic system. And as you know, one of the major principles in geology is that the present is the key to the past. So just as we see that these forces are dominating the current depositional deposition in the present, these forces are also have also left their imprint in the sediment of the subsurface. So we'll look at that in more details as we go forward. So for the purpose of this presentation, we'll zoom into sedimentology and how it is used as a tool for reservoir characterization. So let's look at the data and methodology for reservoir characterization. As geologists in the oil and gas industry, it would have been really nice for us to have reservoirs that look like outcrops, as you can see here in the picture here, whereby we have an extensive rock face and we can actually assess easily the reservoir properties, the facies changes, and how they influence our reservoir properties. However, that is not the case because the reservoirs we're dealing with are several kilometers on the ground. And unless we've developed a technology that we can send somebody down there to to look at the reservoir, the only other methodology that we have for assessing those reservoirs are drilling wells. Okay, drilling wells and taking indirect measurements of those reservoirs down in the subsurface. So two of the types of data that we have that we use to characterize reservoirs are seismic data, which is basically sending down acoustic signals into the subsurface and measuring their return time, and those are used to help map the subsurface structures and stratigraphy. They help us to identify the faults, and they help us to identify fractures and also to delineate reservoir boundaries. The other type of indirect data that we have is the wireline log data. The wireline log data, they include petrophysical data, like resistivity, porosity, density, gamma ray, and they help us to understand rock properties. So there's basically, when you drill the well, you send out some signals into the formation, and then you measure the formation response to those signals. It could be, in the case of gamma ray, it could be you measure the radioactivity. In the case of resistivity, it could be you measure the resistivity of the formation, and then you use the response from those from the tools to characterize the reservoir. However, the only direct access that we have, since we cannot send somebody down there to look at the reservoir, is while we're drilling the well. Normally, we break up the formation in the well into pieces and then bring out the pieces through the annulus in the mud as cuttings. But when we need to assess the reservoir, we have to take cores. The cores is when you bring out the entire drilling string, and then you send down a coring string, a coring barrel with a drill bit and a core barrel that has a hollow that can take the formation or the reservoir into that hollow, bring it out up to the surface, and then you can do your direct measurements on them. So cores are not they are not very easy to take because they affect drilling time and all that, and they are quite expensive. So we don't have a lot of cores for all the reservoirs, but they help us to take direct measurements of the reservoir in the subsurface. They help us to take oriented porosity and permeability measurements, so vertical and horizontal porosity and permeability measurement. They also help us to analyze the mineral composition, the fluid content, the grain size density, and other petrophysical properties within the reservoir directly. Okay, so in reservoir characterization, we use both these direct and indirect methods as a method of carrying out having detailed reservoir characterization reports. So we have two types of cores. So the full bore core is what I just previously described. The sidewalk core is when, after the well is drilled, you send down the coring gun, and then it fires out some tubular pellets into the formation, capturing the formation from the well side, the well side of the well bore, and bringing them up to the surface. So they are smaller, kind of like sidewalk cores from the well bore. They look like core plugs, and you can also take direct measurements on some of them, depending on the recovery from those shots that you've fired. So what do we do with the cores after we obtain them? So when the cores are obtained and taken to the surface, what happens is they are slabbed into two. So we have a 2/3 part of it and a 1/3 part of it. The 2/3 part of it is for analysis. You carry out analysis, you plug those 2/3 parts, you carry out analysis, you take thin sections, you do those vertical and horizontal porosity as well as grain size density. Then if you have special analysis that you need to require, maybe heavy mineral analysis and all that, you can do that on the 2/3. Then the 1/3 is for description. So ideally, a reservoir geologist or a sedimentologist is called in to observe those, to describe those cores and to make detailed description of those cores and to infer from those cores, the depositional environment from the cores. So when you look at the cores for description, you make some observations. So the first observation you make is the core condition. So what is the core condition? Is it a whole core in one length, or is it rubbled? Is it disrupted as a result of probably the technique of the coring? Then you also look at the staining. Do you have hydrocarbon stain or mud stains? The visual clay percentages, which is basically the percentage of clay that you can see within the core. What type of cementation, if there is any, within the core? Is it friable, unconsolidated, or then also you can look at the visual porosity. The visual porosity can be tested easily by pouring some water on the core just to check how quickly it flows into the core. Also, you do a core to log tie. A core to log tie is a simple procedure whereby you take the core, which is taken in driller's depth, and then you tie that depth using a notable contact to the petrophysical logs. You tie that contact to the petrophysical logs, and then you can orient the core within the petrophysical log data. So that's the core to log tie. You observe the lithology of the core, you observe the grain size, you observe the texture, which is the sorting of the core, the sphericity. You observe the different contact and surface types. You observe the sedimentary structures, and also you observe the biogenic structures as well as how they interact, how all these factors interact with one another within the core. So you take that and you note them in your core description sheets. And that forms a core log, which is later digitized into a digital core log. So let's look at some sedimentary structures in core. So we have a lot of sedimentary structures that we can characterize. So for the purpose of this presentation, we can just look at some examples of these sedimentary structures. So there's been an attempt in the past to do what we call an assessment of how sedimentary structures are formed. It's called the current flow regime model. The current flow regime model explains how velocity of flow and the turbulence of a fluid, which is usually water or air in the case of aeolian sediments, how they deposit and form various sedimentary structures. And these flow regimes are characterized into 3 different types of flow regimes. So you have the low flow regime, the intermediate flow regime, and the high flow regimes. So these flow regimes are they are basically telling us about how the energy of the flow of the river. So if you have high energy flow, which is typically in kind of like a fluvial unidirectional system, you have larger grain sizes, because the higher the energy of the flow, the larger the grain sizes can carry. Large grain sizes can carry. So that's called a high flow regime. It's called the turbulent flow. So it's characteristics of fluvial system, fast moving, steep rivers, and they can transport coarse sediments, gravels, and cobbles. And as the flow regime gets lower, so intermediate flow regime, you can have cross beddings, so which is typically of some of the channels and rivers that we have in the Niger Delta. They are more like intermediate flow regime, because we don't have those high steep rivers. They're like intermediate flow regimes where you have cross beddings, ripple marks, and planar laminations. Then when you have very low flow regime, you're talking about laminar flow. Laminar flow is like what you have in the lower shore faces, like what you have in kind of like more of like a marine environment where you have lower energy of deposition. So one thing we need to understand is that the higher the energy of the flow, the higher the grain sizes it can carry. And that also gives us an indication as to the kind of depositional environment in which these sediments are being deposited. So when we look at the sediments that have been deposited, looking at the grain sizes, looking at the sphericity, looking at the texture and all that, we can then infer the kind of environment that would have deposited them. One other thing that we need to understand is that in a core, we have maximum of about 6 inches of rock face horizontally, which we can look at. So in terms of interpreting sedimentary structure, we have to be a bit interpretative, in the sense that we need to understand how overall these sedimentary structures are formed and how their lateral expression will be, in order for us to be able to recognize them in a core phase. So for instance, this is an outcrop, and in an outcrop we can see all the cross beds and how they terminate in their faucets. But within a core, you can only see them in what looks like a planar laminated systems. Okay, the only difference is that they are inclined, and you see that they are kind of like changing their direction, which is very typical of what you see when you take a small 6-inch section of this overall expression of the outcrop. You see a 6 feet section of the outcrop will show a very similar expression as what you have in a core. Okay. So in terms of interpreting the core, there's something we know as lithofacies. So lithofacies are basically descriptive expressions of features that are seen within the cores. Okay, so the first feature is the lithology. The lithology and the dominant grain size. So are we looking at sands? Are we looking at heteroliths, or are we looking at mudstones? And in some cases, coal. Then the next is the dominant sedimentary structure. So are they massive? So massive means they are devoid of any sedimentary structure. They were deposited like turbulently without any ability to develop structure. Are they cross-bedded? Do we have planar or parallel laminations? Do we have humocky or swell crossbeds? Do we have wave ripples or wavy ripples? Are they current rippled? Do we have bioturbations? So bioturbations, basically, like I mentioned earlier, are structures that are left behind by living organisms during or shortly after deposition. Do we have rootlets, or are they rooted, or are they fossiliferous, like some of the are they fossiliferous, like some of the sediments that we have capping some of the reservoirs in Niger Delta, or we have a lot of fossiliferous imprints within the muds capping some of those reservoirs. Then also secondary sedimentary structures like cement, siderite, and soft sediment deformation. So these help us in classifying the sedimentary lithofacies. Okay. So what happens is that the lithofacies is basically a type of facies expression that we see in a rock that gives us an idea into the depositional process that formed that rock. So in terms of, for an example, we can have a cross-bedded quartz to gravelly sandstone. So that's a lithofacies, and that tells us about the rock and what the rock we are looking at. So what happens is those facies, we've characterized them in the Niger Delta, and we've been able to develop a facies scheme that tells us that whenever we are looking at rocks within the Niger Delta, we can have each and any of these together. So these are lithofacies on their own. The lithofacies gives us an idea into the process that formed that rock that we're looking at. Okay, so while the lithofacies is the product of the rock, it can help us to look to infer the process that formed that rock, and also give us an insight into the depositional environment. So for lithofacies, we have another further step that will take it called little facies association. So those little facies association tell us basically that there are facies that occur close to one another, adjacent to one another, okay, depending on what the environment is doing. So for instance, you have each little facies, they tell us they give us information about the depositional environment, but they are not enough on their own to pinpoint precisely how this depositional environment was responsible for the deposit for that formation. So, but grouping these little facies together gives us into successions, gives us a full information as to the depositional environment. So for instance, if we look here, if we look at the right of this slide, it says grouping facies into facies association and facies succession allow interpretation in context of the neighboring facies and also constitutes a powerful tool for depositional environment interpretation and reconstruction. So for a finding upwards fluvial system, you can see that at the base of the fluvial system, we have quartz grain sediments which form the initial deposition of the fluvial system, where is a high energy river bringing in quartz grain sediments. And as it wanes and stabilizes, you see that the shallower parts of the shallower parts of the river system deposit considerably finer materials until you get up into the abandonment phase, where you have the floodplain and the floodplain with mud and silt. At this stage, the fluvial system has been abandoned. So you have the active channel, and then as it moves away, you have the active channel at the base, and then leading up into the floodplain. So you can interpret the entire final upward sequence as a fluvial system, a fluvial channel system. So, as geologists, we're like detectives who have been presented with a product, and now looking at that product, we have to characterize what led to the production of that product. So we look at the rocks, we characterize the response, and by understanding the response, we deduce the depositional environment. So the question is, why do we need the depositional environments? Depositional environments are very important because each of these depositional environments have a distinct reservoir characteristics, and those distinct reservoir characteristics help us to predict away from the well that we are looking at what the facies is doing and how the reservoir quality deteriorates or improves, or how the reservoir architecture progresses away from that particular point of the well which we are looking at. So let's look at delta front processes within the Niger Delta, and we'll look at the different products of some of the dominant depositional imprints. So the fluvial, the tidal, and the wave-dominated system. So for the delta front processes, we said a delta is where a flowing body of water, like a river, meets a standing body of water, much like an ocean or a lake. Okay, so in this case, we have the fluvial system bringing out water and sediments out into a standing body of water, which is the first thing that happens is that you have fresh water from the fluvial system bringing out those fresh water into a salt water with more density. So what happens is, first you have a zone of mixing, which we call a brackish water zone, and then it drops sediments, and those sediments, we call them the distributary mouth bar. So the velocity of the water as it carries sediment drops drastically, and you have a dumping of sediment. So what happens is, first and foremost, quartz sediments are dumped first. And as they are done, let's look at a cross section from A to A prime. From A to A prime, you have the sediments being dumped, and you have a zone of intermixing where the quartz grain sediments or the clastic sediments are being mixed with the muddy sediments of the ocean, okay, of the marine settings. And then from B to B prime, you see that the distributary mouth bars has been deposited. You have a zone of mixing, so you have kind of like a quartzing upwards sequence where you have at the base the marine sediments, and as you go up, significantly coarser sediments on top. Okay, so if we look at that, how do the sediments get remobilized? So what happens is as the channel brings out the sediments out into the basin, at the shoreline, you have the sediment being deposited as mouth bars, and then you have wind or wave remodifying those sediments and smearing them across to form longshore currents. So the distributary mouth bars are being reworked by the waves out into to form wave sediments. So let's look at the fluvial dominated, an overview of the fluvial dominated system. So while looking at cores from the fluvial dominated system, you have thick quartz grain sandstones. You have thick quartz grain sandstones as a result of the high energy of the fluvial system. They are usually polysorted, and unidirectional, and then you have plant drips. When you have abandonment, you have plant dripped faucets as a result of the organic materials. Then you also have clay drip faucets when you now have the abandonment also. Then bioturbation is usually rare to absent as a result of the fact that within a high energy environment, you will not have a lot of organic organic activities. Then when you do have them, you have them as very large of amorphal burrows, which are an imprint of shrimps within that system. Then for tidal dominated systems, you have medium to fine grained sediments. So the tidal system is much more complicated because you can have within the tidal system, you have tidal channels, which are channels that are influenced by the tide. So you have in those tidal channels, you have bidirectional cross beds, which indicate that you have both the ebb and the flow. So you have the fluvial system bringing out sediments and water in one direction, and then you have the marine tides pushing them back in another direction. So those leave an imprint on the sediment. You also have bimodal sorting within those tidal channels. Those bimodal sorting means that in the tidal channels, you see coarse grain sediments and medium grain sediments forming bands. So you have coarse grains, medium grain, coarse grains, medium grains, which is as a result of the kind of like the winnowing or reworking of those sediments as a result of the tidal forces. So they're usually depending on the environment, you can have bidirectional sorting and cross beds. You also have alternating bed load and suspension deposits. You also have lenticular and flacer deposition as a result of the periods where you have flow and then you have non-flow, where you have suspension deposition, where you have mud being deposited. Then you also have a prevalence of bioturbation as a result of when you have quiet environment. You have some of those quiet environment and an abundance of organic material. You have a lot of organisms going in there and burrowing, okay, which is what we have in all these in all these areas here. You have a lot of bioturbations churning up the sediments. Then in a wave-dominated system, you have coarsening upwards. Generally, you have a generally coarsening upwards grain size. You have medium to fine sands, usually very fine sands from the upper shore faces. And then as you go down into the lower shore faces, you have more muds coming to the system. Then you have parallel laminations as a result of laminar flow, sandy heteroliths. So you have like I said, a quartz upward sequence. You have humocky and swelly stratification. So in which case you have like curvy waveforms as a result of the wave current. Then you have sparse perturbation in the upper shore faces, and they are usually well sorted. So the sparse perturbation in the upper shore faces as a result of the high energy winnowing of the waves, and you tend to have less perturbation. So in conclusion, like I said initially, in conclusion, each and every one of these, the delta is a complex delta. It has been affected by both autogenic, which are the local depositional structures, and allogenic influences. So the allogenic are the general sea level changes and all that, global processes, as well as tectonic forces. And these forces have all left their imprint on the sediments of the Niger Delta. And although we've just looked at one particular section of the reservoir characterization, this particular section of the reservoir characterization has significant influence on the reservoir architecture. It has significant influence on the reservoir property development. It has significant influence on the reservoir management and the decisions that you make as regards how you produce, how you model, and how you manage these reservoirs. So going forward, I think we might need to understand that the Niger Delta is not just a classic wave-dominated system, but is a system that is influenced significantly by both tidal and fluvial forces. And all these forces have left significant imprint on the sediments within the subsurface of the Niger Delta. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Mr. Jude. In fact, I was just taking notes and taking notes and taking notes. I so much appreciate what you have done. We are grateful to have listened to you attentively, and we have taken cognizance of your conclusion and what you have put forward. On behalf of NAPI, we are grateful for this time of exposition. I think just to recap what Jude has taken us through in the last few minutes or so, he has been able to establish the fact that the Nile Delta is subdivided into a river-dominated, wave-dominated, and tide-dominated delta. And all these, they have their different implications. Even though the Nile Delta has always been scheduled as the wave-dominated delta, but he has gone through all that we have listened to, and he has proven to us that to a large extent, there have been some influences from the fluvial and also the tidal environment affecting some aspects of the delta. He was able to give us some different data sets. Eventually, I think he just narrowed in on the core data, which he used in explaining the various aspects and the insight we can get from core description. He outlined several of them: the core condition, hydrocarbon staining, the visual clay percentage, the texture, the structures, both sedimentary structure and biogenic structures. All this, and even the core to log tie, can be derived from the core data. He also explained to us the flow regime and the implication of this flow regime as regarding the grain sizes, where we have the high flow regime, intermediate, and also the low flow regime, depicting different grain sizes ranging from coarse down to fine grains. and it also gives an idea of the energy level within the particular environment. He focused a lot more on lithophagy, which is actually a subset of the sedimentary environment, where we looked at the environment being the process and the lithophagy being the product of these depositional environments as a response of what we are seeing. He also established the various schemes of lithophagy and also the association, where he further went through the characteristics of the wave and tidal dominated delta, the different grain sizes, the sequences that are occurring within these different scenarios. And he concluded by saying that the Nile Delta is actually a complex one, as stipulated by other authors. He had just confirmed that from his own studies and his own understanding and knowledge. And this delta is also affected by different processes that have left their own imprint on the sediment over time, whether the tectonic forces, whether the various episodes of depositional that must have occurred there, and even the erosional episodes that must have been experienced in the delta. All these have left their imprint on the sediment within the Nile Delta. And eventually he concluded by saying that both tidal and fluvial activities affected the sediment packages within the Nile Delta, not only the wave per se, but also tidal and fluvial, as he showed from that diagram we started with. Mr. Jude, we are very grateful and we are thankful to you for taking us through the Nile Delta Reservoir geology processes and the products. I'll open up this session for Q&A. I guess Dr. Harry, this is part of what I should do, or someone else is handling the Q&A. Dr. Harry. Okay, we'll open it up for questions and answers, and I'm sure Jude is on standby, to take questions that we may have. If there's any, please, you can unmute and take the questions. Signify by raising up your hand, then you'll be called upon. Okay, we have one Namdi Ian. So you can unmute and speak, please. Namdi Ian. Namdi, are you there with us? Can you unmute and speak, please? Okay, maybe Namdi is having difficulties connecting or something. Maybe Samson Roberts. Can you unmute and speak? Yes, go ahead. Samson Roberts. Jude, I hope you can hear me. Can you?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. That means I'm communicating.
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
This is Samson Robert from Akwa Ibom State, the student of Akwa Ibom State University, Department of Geology, 100 level. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead with your question, please.
Okay. Please, sir, I would like you to further expatiate more on the effect of the fluvial on okay, let me just say I would like you to expatiate more on the effect that takes place in the fluvial dominated areas.
Okay,
can you hear me?
So, yes, so I can hear you. So, Mr. Chairman, can we take all the questions so that I'll answer them at the end of?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's good. So Namdi, you can take yours. I think you got the first one, just the effect of the fluvial dominated delta. Okay, Namdi, you can ask your question. Namdi. Okay, Namdi is not responding for now. Maybe Jude, you can just take. So we have somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the fluvial dominated sediments within a delta, so they are basically sediments that are deposited as a result of the river's flow. So the river flows in one direction, which is direction usually downhill. In a fluvial dominated system, there are two types of fluvial dominated sediments. So we have the braided system, and then we have the meandering system. Okay, so in the braided system, you have, for instance, if any of us have traveled across from Onitsha through Asaba, maybe across that Niger bridge. If you look into the water, you see what we call braid bars. So you have a very wide channel width, and then you have channels in between that. And as they are going with a lot of energy. So they deposit braid bars in between the channels, and then you have the channel built, and it deposits. So they're usually very coarse grains. They have less mud frameworks within them, and then they are usually very wide. The channel width is usually very wide in terms of kilometers, maybe 1 to 2 kilometers in width. And in some cases, in some channel belts of braided systems, we have seen them go up to like 5 to 6 kilometers in width. Okay, not in the Niger Delta. The River Niger has at the widest point, the River Niger is about 2.5 kilometers in width. Then in the meandering system, the meandering rivers or the meandering fluvial system are the fluvial systems we see within the main delta itself. So these are the distributaries of the Niger itself. So like the Non River, the Focados River, and all these other smaller rivers and creeks that we have. So those are meandering rivers. So if you fly across from probably Lagos to Port Harcourt, if you look out the plane, you will see meandering rivers that snake across the delta. So those rivers, they are lower energy compared to the braided river system. And what they do is that as they move, they tend to avulse. So they cut on the concave and deposit on they cut on the convex, on the concave, and then deposit on the convex. So what happens is, as they move, they tend to change their shapes, and when they do, they have a bit more mud frameworks within them as a result of their lower energy, and as a result of the fact that within the environment of that fluvial, of that meandering system, you have a lot of vegetation and a lot of and then as they move, they cut, and sometimes they cut and they leave some standing body of waters, which in some cases they call them osbo lakes. And those osbo lakes also tend to have some muds within them. So in terms of the two different types of fluvial dominated system, for the braided systems, high energy, higher net to gross, clean sands, poorer sorting, while in the meandering systems, which are usually the distributary channels, they have lower net to gross, lower width. They are not as wide as the braided systems, and then they have more mud frameworks within them, and then they have more time for quiet deposition. So in terms of when muds fall out of the precipitate out of a standing body of water, so those things happen. And then in terms of depositional quality, a braided fluvial system is much higher net to gross than the meandering fluvial system. And in terms of depositional width, unless you have a significant stack of those meandering systems, in a braided system, you have thicker reservoirs compared to what you have in a meandering fluvial systems. Then as the fluvial system builds out into the shoreline, what you tend to now have, especially in some parts of the delta, which is usually the eastern and the central parts of the delta, you now have what we call funnel-like shaped frameworks, where you have tidal influences, and those tidal influences towards the marine end of the rivers tend to have a different framework of deposition. So you now begin to have tidal input into those rivers, whereby you now have more marine influences. You now have more marine influences. You now have more bidirectional structures. You now have more tidal marshes and tidal swamps and other tidal frameworks. So that's just expatiating from on the fluvial system down into the tidal system, basically. I hope that answers your question, Samson.
Okay, Samson, I hope that sits well with you. We have Dr. Fume Oji. Okay, you can just unmute and ask a question, please. Hello, are you there? Dr. Fume, please, you can unmute and speak. Okay, let's take Godwin Dixon. Godwin Dixon, you can unmute and ask your question, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I believe you can hear me. Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Yeah, you go ahead, please.
Okay, my name is Godwin Dixon. I'm a young professional in the field of geology. Thank you, Dr. Jude, for this very educative lecture. So my question is, before I ask my question, I'd like to question your introductory statement about the Niger Delta basin. You said the Niger Delta Reservoir is shaped by millions of years of sedimentation, tectonic activity, and interaction between fluvial, deltaic, and marine environments. So I believe these interactions are what led to the sedimentation and formation of the Niger Delta basin. So I would like for you to touch the tectonic process and the product as related to the Niger Delta basin. I don't know if you understand the technical.
Okay.
Hello.
You took note of that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's take Samson Robert. Samson Robert, you can unmute and ask your question so we can take it together with that one.
Okay, please, sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, Samson,
Yes,
we can hear you.
All right, thank you very much for this opportunity again. Please, my question is, from the diagram given, I saw dunes and anti-dunes. From the diagram given in the current flow regime. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
What I saw there, I saw dunes and I saw anti-dunes. So I would like to know more about anti-dunes, though I've been taught about dunes and not the anti-dunes. So I would like you to further expatiate more on what anti-dunes are.
Okay.
Okay. I think Jude can take that too.
Okay. So for tectonic processes, within the Niger Delta, as we know, the Niger Delta, in terms of structural configuration, you have what we call, in terms of structural configuration, we have what we call scene depositional faulting. Okay, so as deposition occurs, you tend to have failure on some critical zones, and those critical zones tend to form what we call scene depositional faults within the delta. And those scene depositional faulting have effect on some of the trapping mechanisms that we have in the delta. So in terms of, you can review Dust and Anomashola. He explains significantly about those interpositional faults and down to basin faults that we have within the Niger Delta, and how they form the trapping mechanism within the Niger Delta. So you can review some of those things. So those are some of the tectonic forces I was talking about. And then the other tectonic forces that has effect on the Niger Delta are the sea level rises and falls as occasioned by where they now have an influence. We call that allogenic influence on the sediments, on the deposits of the delta. Okay, so you have, where you have the sediments being deposited, and over time, when the sea level rises, you have marine incursion, which now floods over those sediments, thereby forming a reservoir seal over the reservoir. And then over time, you have sea level drop, where you now have more deposition of reservoirs, and then it's a cyclic process that occurs over and over again. Okay. Then for the second questions, so for antidunes, so antidunes occur where they are formed under very, very fast flows in shallow water. Okay. They can also be associated with things like standing waves on the water surface. So antidunes, things they form on places like beaches where you have very fast flowing water, shallow beaches where you have very fast flowing water, and occasionally they can migrate upstream and downstream to remain stable sometimes. So they form, basically, we want to know in terms of the sediment flow, the sediment current flow regime, they form as a result of very fast flow, and they also form where you have shallow water. So another effect, or another imprint on that sediment flow regime, is the depth of the water and the velocity of the water. So when you have very high velocity water flowing a very high flow regime, and then you have shallow depth of water, but it's flowing at a very high regime, you can have antidunes, and those antidunes form within those sections. So, but the thing about antidunes is that they are rarely preserved because of the high velocity of the waters. They're usually poorly preserved, and in the geological record, we don't have a lot of antidunes, but they can be they've been generated in laboratory experiments, and we have a few examples of them, but they are not very well preserved. That is why most of the time, in terms of outcrops and in terms of cores, they are not usually of significant value, because they are easily eroded.
Okay, thank you very much, Jude, for that apt explanation. I have one question online here, which I'd like to read out. Yeah. So I'm Dr. Namdi Inyang from the University of Uyo. Thank you for your presentation. I want you to please explain which is more descriptive of the Niger Delta depositional environment. Is it that the delta evolved from fluvial to wave or antidal environment, or are all these processes active currently in the delta? Thank you. Very interesting.
So thank you, Dr. Namdi. So in terms of how the delta evolved, as can be expected, the fluvial is the initial deposition of the delta. So the first phase of the delta if you go to the Ughelli depot belt, majority of the sediments you find there will be fluvially influenced, highly fluvially influenced, because that's the beginning stage of the delta. But as the delta progressed, the delta began to evolve into more of a tidally influenced and more of a wave influenced delta. And over time, those influences have progressively shaped and modified the delta into what we have currently. And in the subsurface, you will see that even as what you have on the surface is on the eastern part is more like you have a more tidally strong, tidally influenced delta. You have the tidal forces stronger on the eastern part, and then on the western part, you have more of the wave forces because that's the direction of the longshore currents. Okay, and then in the middle part of the delta, you have the main rivers and the main tributaries bringing out those sediments. So that's the same way you have it in the subsurface. If you observe the sediments in the subsurface of the eastern delta, you will see that you have that more tidally strong imprint, and then in the western parts, okay, you have more of that. You have more of the wave imprint, more strongly preserved, and then in the central part, you have a mix of both the wave and the tidal, and then the fluvial imprint showing more strongly because that's the axis of the main tributaries of the delta. So that's how it developed. Initial stage, fluvial, purely fluvial, and then as it began to develop and prograde over time, because the delta is a prograding delta. As it began to prograde over time, you now begin to have the remodification of those sediments by the wave and the tidal forces.
Okay, thank you very much, Jude. I appreciate your patience and the detailed explanation that you have given in all this. I want to acknowledge the presence of our immediate past president, Dr. Abiodun Ogunjobi, F. Napi. Sir, it's an honor to have you in this call. Thank you once again. I think my job is almost done as the chairman of this session. I want to invite the President-elect, Madam P, to come up and give us the vote of thanks. I think she's still on the call.
I'm still here.
Okay, Madam. Mrs.
Yeah.
Olajumoke Ajayi F. Napi. Madam, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Wilson Awesome. Thank you very much for anchoring the session. And to our great presenter, I really appreciate your presentation, taking us back to the basics of geology. And it really showed that everybody, people were well attentive because the number of questions that came in. And we can't appreciate you any more than, we thank you very much. We can't appreciate you less because a lot of work would have gone into putting this highly educative presentation together. Thank you very much. And I believe that when we call upon you next time, you make yourself available to continue to contribute your own quota to the growth of our great association, NAPI. Thank you very much. And Chairman, thank you very much for the way the session was anchored. We appreciate your support and all that you do at every point in time for NAPI. And to all our fellows who are on this call, we thank you for making time out to attend the technical meeting of today. To all our members, we thank you also for creating time to come in and participate at this session. Thank you very much, chapter coordinator and all the ESCOs and all the ESCOs of NAPI who are on this call. Thank you very much. And this is a paper that I don't think we should just limit it to chapter, the chapter alone. We can also, I believe that you can put a paper together. I don't know if you are putting anything together for the abstract for this paper, so that it can be one of the things we'll publish in our upcoming book of abstract. If you have not given it a thought, I think it's something you should be thinking about, because it's really rich. Thank you very much. This to our presenter. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, madam, I'll look towards it.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We appreciate you all for creating time to attend. We really have good attendance, and we look forward to having you at our next month chapter technical meeting. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chairman.
Okay, Madam, thank you so very much for that vote of thanks. I think we have come to the end of this technical meeting. Dr. Emeka, maybe you can just...
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Close out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you very much, President-elect. Thank you very much, Jude, for the wonderful presentation. It's very enlightening, and I'm sure we've all learned a lot. At this point, we at the Uyo Calabar chapter wish to appreciate every member of the panel and all the attendees for attending today's session. At this point, we'll want to say thank you, and we'll see you some other time. Thank you.